All right, the conversation that you are about to hear is one that I had with Utibe Bassey. Utibe is a vice president of CX at an energy company. I met Utibe when she was a client of ours inside the Career Catapult Executive Coaching Program, and we worked together to land her skip level promotion. And fast forward a few years, she has gone on to write a book titled Love as a KPI. And it is my absolute honor and joy to be sharing space with her in this moment to support her in spreading the word to as many leaders as possible. This is truly a body of work that I am bought into, that I believe in wholeheartedly, and I know that it will make a big difference for you. And also, I want you to see what it looks like when you are tapping into your convictions and leveraging them to create a very strong personal brand, because that's the sort of thing that can really turbocharge your corporate career and your life. So sit back and enjoy. All right, Tibe, hello, welcome.
Hey Stella, how's it going?
Good, good. Okay, so full disclosure, you and I had this conversation, back in what, December, November of last year.
Yeah, I think I remember.
And at the time, I hadn't read the book. And just for anyone who's watching, this is the book we're talking about today, Love as a KPI, written by Utibe Bassey, of my friend, my colleague, client, all the things, right? We'll talk about that. But I hadn't read the book, and but I really wanted to have the conversation with you. And then after we had that conversation, I thought, I really want to do this justice. I want to go back and read it, sit with it, process my thoughts, and then just thank you again for coming back and having this conversation so that we can really, I thought when we talked about it last time, we did not really go as deep as I wanted to go on the topic. And so thank you for honoring the request to return and to discuss this awesome body of work that you've put out into the world.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, and thank you for having me twice. And I'm honored that you took the time. I know you have more than one or two things going on, Stella. So it really is an honor that you took the time to read it. I'm just always glad to chat with you and just enjoy. I just enjoy
Yeah.
having conversations with you. So yeah, thank you.
Well, let's start with a proper introduction of you, and then maybe if you can weave into that to how you and I even met. I mean, we know each other in a couple different dimensions. So, do you want to talk about just who you are, what you do, in your professional career, and then also how you and I connected?
Sure. So my name is Utibe Bassey. I am currently Vice President of Customer Experience at Dominion Energy. Dominion Energy is a utility with about 3.6 million customers across several states. And so I've been in this role for over 5 years, and you are a big part of that story. And so I've been making the Golden Girls reference, like picture it, Sicily, 1922. So picture it, Tibe. 2019, 2020. And I had been in a role that I really did love. I loved the role, but I knew that I had come to the end of it. And I don't know how I knew. I think sometimes you just have this knowing, but I knew there was more. I knew there was more impact for me. There was more responsibility that I needed. I really did know, but I didn't know how to get there. And on a fateful COVID day, I don't remember, I was probably scrolling on social media and I saw that you were having a boot camp. And I know you because I'm friends with your sister. And I was like, everything in the copy was like you were reading all the things that I was aspiring for. And so I joined the Catapult Your Career Boot Camp. And that boot camp for me was bananas. The saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I think that was me in a nutshell. Every single day, everything you were saying it resonated so deeply. I was telling everyone to join. I was having like epiphany after epiphany after epiphany. And I actually felt like, this is going to sound dramatic, but imagine being in a well where it's dark and you're looking for a way out, and then someone comes with a torchlight. I actually felt like that. I can see light. There's something, I can't remember the specific, the thing you can't remember what people say, but I remember the feeling and the knowing. And so that is where we met. And then I made the decision to take that bet on my own self and get the help I needed to be ready for what is now my role, And so I can't tell the story of this place I am now, and even the work I'll talk about here without you, because that was very, very pivotal. My mind shifted in very, very specific ways, which hopefully through our conversation I can share more
Oh,
about.
such high praise. Thank you for sharing that. And it's I remember that specific boot camp because it was our first ever boot camp. I know that
Yeah.
you may not have known that, but it was, I mean, I obviously had been in business for much longer, but it was the first time that I put that particular offering together.
Wow.
And I remember there were 20 women uh, behind the scenes. You probably didn't know that because you couldn't see. Zoom doesn't announce that with webinars, but there were 20 women and you were one of them. Now we've done, I don't know, 30, 40 boot camps since, and there are 1,200 people now on the other end. But at the time there
Wow.
were 20
Wow.
and you were one of them. And it just the fact that our relationship obviously you became a client, worked together, and now we have conversations probably every few months or so. And I've just enjoyed your process. I've enjoyed your journey. I've enjoyed the behind the scenes of you putting out this book into the world. And I'm freaking proud of you. Like really, honestly, that
Mhm.
I mean, it takes a lot. You know, people have ideas and books in them, and to actually, not only give your all within your corporate career and to remain a top performer and a top potential leader, but then also to honor the call and carve out time and energy, probably on weekends or probably at nights and on even your vacations, all the things, just to be able to do this. So before we get into the work, I just want to honor that because I know there are others listening who have a body of work in them as well. And you are an embodiment of what that commitment and that conviction looks like. And that's just who you are. That's the nature of who you were when we worked together. It's the nature of who you are now. So I want to start off by saying that I'm really proud of you.
I take that and I appreciate that. You have played such a role. I have many Stella voice notes in my phone. And you've called me higher in many ways. So I appreciate it. And I appreciate you for saying that, but I also appreciate the role that you've played in that because you are 100% right. It's been an internal challenge, again, which I can share more about. It also logistically very difficult to do this, but you've played a very literal role in my resolve to keep going. So thank you.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into because we can do this all day, but let's get into why I wanted to first why I
Yeah.
wanted to have you here to talk about this book, besides me, my own selfish reason of like reading it and wanting to talk with you about it. Um, one of the things I talk about with our audience, well, a couple of things. One is I wanted people to see what it looks like when you are obviously committed to your corporate career and your growth, but also again, using that as a launch pad, using that as a baseline for honoring a calling or developing a personal brand or something else that matters deeply to you. So you've done that beautifully here in the book. The other reason is that one of the topics that our clients have probably heard me talk about for the last 5 or so years is strategic vulnerability. It's a term that I coined that really is about how leaders can be more authentically vulnerable. Not necessarily, I mean, when we think of vulnerability, we think about, divulging all the personal details of our lives to everybody that we encounter. And what I talk about is just much more strategic than that. It's being very intentional, very thoughtful about allowing others to truly see us in a way that uplifts, that inspires, that motivates, that empowers those who work with us so that they are better for that. They're better because we ourselves are their manager. Like because this person worked for me, they are a better person. And there's so many stories in this book, TB, that touch that. So many. So I want to talk with you about that. And then the final reason was that I've known you for years, but there were things in this book I was like, I didn't know that about her. That was so
Mm,
like you share so many of those details, whether it's your early experiences as a
mm,
child or your first job and some of those things. So can
mm.
you start us there? Talk about just pick any of the early experiences that you had that and how that became the baseline or the how that set the tone and the stage for what would come many years later in the
Mm.
form of this book.
For sure. The one I go to is my very first job. And I go there because for so long, this one job, this very specific job was something I tried to hide. So when people talked about like their career and their work, particularly early on, I didn't have the blue chip company experiences. I had a lot of just like fast food, random job experiences. So I would always want to hide it. But now I understand that it was very literally the bedrock for so much of what I do now. So I share that my role now is Vice President of Customer Experience. Our team is responsible for both the strategy and the operations of all of our customer functions as a utility. if we rewind it to my first job, I was working in a popular fast food chain that I will not eat from to this day. Nothing wrong with it, and it was in that role, I was a cashier, but at some point I did all the jobs, whether it's making the burgers or doing all the fries. Again, did not see any glory in it, did not see any purpose in it. In fact, it was basically I was supposed to go to college. That those plans were halted. I didn't know what else to do. I was in a new country. I was like, let me just go ahead and work. That was the only thing. But it was in that role that I started to observe. And I don't know that I was that self-aware, Stella. I wasn't, a 16-year-old saying, interesting. These systems are hampering how. But I started to pick things up that would stay with me for a long time. I started to see there was a strong connection between even the energy that our manager brought in that day and how we would perform. Like there would be a connection between that energy and how we would engage with customers. The energy between not just our manager, but even the frontline supervisor. I remember the names and faces of several of them. And the one day it would be such and such on the floor, and she'd be supervisor, and we'd all be laughing, and that energy would translate to our customers, and it'd be this, and it's kind of like you whistle while you work, you're working, you don't even know time is going. And then some other of the frontline supervisors, it's just like tense, and there's a connection. And then even with the customers and right, the energy you gave them and how they reciprocated. And when there was a really rude customer, and if someone matched that energy, it escalated. There were so many things that you learn working literally in a fast food restaurant. And I think I had some very key moments there, one of which I shared in the book, which is when a manager was berating publicly just like yelling at her, one of our colleagues. And I think she thrived on the attention because the more people gathered, the louder she got. And I had an out of body experience where I sort of stepped in and was like, you can't talk to her that way. And I vulnerability hangover, like I wanted the ground to swallow me up. I didn't, but I think for me, it also registered like, hey, there's a cost to people that businesses may not factor in. A business could be a source of like the growth and expansion of a person. And I've experienced that myself. And a business could be the source of the diminishing of a person. And I witnessed that. So many of those experiences, but that's the one that stands out for sure.
So powerful. So for people who are like, okay, so love as a KPI, like the idea of love and business together, like no, everyone, obviously we know what love is. Well, yeah. Some might argue that we don't, right? But everyone wants to think that they know what love is. And we typically reserve language like love for our loved ones at home, our families, our friends, right? Are the things that are personal to us, our hobbies. We talk about love in that context. It is very rare that the language of love is brought in internally into a business. A person might even say, I love that company. But the idea that love can be a guiding principle that we can internally organize around within companies is I would say a new idea. So let's unpack that a little bit. What is love in the context of business?
I wrestled with this word myself, to be honest. Love is the word that I kept coming back to, Stella, because love is it's like the desire for the highest good of a person. There's no other word, there was no other way to capture it. If I want the absolute best for you, even if it costs me something, that is the word that I think captured that. And so for the purpose of this book, I have a definition in there which I can share. And it's not tied to an emotion, and one of the things I argue is it can't be tied to an emotion because if nothing that we can manage should be tied to a feeling. Feelings come and go. But if you are the disciplined focus of prioritizing another person, so I say love is the outcome of the perspective, the posture, right? So how you see people is important. We've all either been there or been around people who see people as either a means to an end. And we've all been to some extent seen as that, whether as a customer or as an employee. So I'll sort of summarize the definition. It's the outcome of the perspective, how you see people, the posture, how you position yourself towards people, and the practice. It's basically solving for the betterment of other people. And I think with a definition like that, or if you just anchor on, it captures the desire for the better, the best, the greatest good for a person. We can see that it's not something that people will say, I don't want the best for people, right? I think it's not And I understand the words, especially the word love in in English language. In some languages, there are many words that sort of help you dissect different types of love. In the English language, it's just one word. But if we take it at the pure intention, it's just you want the best for people and
Yeah.
you see each person as valuable. And when I say that, it's hard to get, even in the hard-nosed business person, people shaking their heads saying no. And so then the argument is, if that's true, then what should we be doing differently? What should we be measuring? How do we assess that? How do we know that the way this product's designed or what we put in this food or the ingredients that we choose, how do we know that they're in service of the best of the person? And so that's the argument that I try to make through this work.
Yeah, no, it's really important. One of the things that I think you and I even talked about this when I first saw, or when you and I talked about the concept, the first thing that occurred to me was, okay, if we strip away the word love itself and get to the heart of what you said, I thought about terms like servant leadership. I thought about some of the other terms, empathy. These are terms that have been around in business. I know I learned them in business school and every business school textbook. So I want you, and I know you and I talked about this, but I want you to give the audience a chance to hear this. What is different then about what you've done and love in this context versus some of the other age-old terms that have been around when we think about how to treat people in business?
Sure. I think the North Star for all of those things are the same. I think what I've done with love as a KPI is, so for example, empathy is one of the indicators, is I've tried to say if this is the ultimate good of a person is love, well, what does it look like? And I've tried to identify a few specific indicators. My background, in addition to being CX and operations, is design, like design strategy, experience design. And any design, any experience that we have, Stella, for any company, there are principles that guide them, right? We may not see them. In fact, good design means you don't see them. But for whether it's, Warby Parker or a physical location, there's some design principles that architects use, that designers use for products, for services. And what I'm saying is, hey, if we take this thing called love, here are the ways you know love is present. One of those ways is empathy, right? And there are four others, and they get increasingly challenging, right? I think the last one is sacrifice. People are like, what does that mean? If that's what love, if these things show love is present, meaning, and it's also data driven, if someone is showing someone grace when they've messed up, right? And because they're looking out for the best of that person, what's the reaction that they get when they do that? And so let me back up. What I've done is said, this is my own thing. This is my own view of the world, but the world needs more love. I know that sounds very, UNICEF-y, but what are the indicators of love? And can we use these indicators as principles that we use as we design, build? And so the differences between servant leadership, they're getting at the same thing. With love as a KPI, my goal is to be a lot more pragmatic. It doesn't sound pragmatic at first, but when you get into it, it's basically helping organizations intentionally weave these things into how business is done daily, not just a mindset thing, but really a practice that can be actually adopted.
Yeah, speaking to that pragmatism, that's one of the things I think people will have to wrap their heads around as they contend with this topic. Is the first thing that they may think is, well, that all sounds well and good, right? But I have a quota. I have to make my quarter, right? This quarter we're behind on XYZ ABC metric, um, right? So talk a little bit about how to help people think about this and behave differently versus what they may traditionally think of as business principles, right? When we think of business principles, we think of quotas and we think of, metrics, we think of KPIs, we think of profit, right?
Yeah.
Which is ultimately what the business is. I mean, most businesses are in the business of profits. That's the reason they open at least one of the reasons they open their doors is to make money.
Yeah.
And so it's easy for someone to think that that goal of profit is at odds with some of the principles that you've talked about, especially when they're pushed to their maximum. So if love is the ultimate, right? Ultimate love might mean ultimate sacrifice, ultimate
Mhm.
trust, ultimate.
Yeah.
So if we push all of these things to their extreme,
Yeah.
does that then fly in the face of the profit motive or some of the other hard-nosed business principles that we are usually driving toward?
I don't believe it does. I do believe that it does require us to expand, to have a more complete view of what it takes to actually be a successful company. And I'll explain why. I think that regardless, okay, so my job is CX, customer experience. And when I joined, not just this company, any company, and I'm doing CX, okay, I'm a CX person, people say, oh, you're here to help us do customer experience. And my response is, you're already doing it. I'm here to help us do it well. So there's already a thing. It's like someone saying, I want a personal brand. I was like, you already have a brand. You just want to be intentional about the brand. So there's not the absence of the intention does not mean something's not happening. And so the absence of having principles, whether they're around love or whatever the case may be, does not mean you don't have principles. Like you still have something that's guiding. There's still an outcome of your work. So if you're driving the team and people don't want to work for you, they're disengaged, they're burning out, they're quitting, you yourself feel like when you walk into the room, people tense up. All of these things are happening. You may be getting the result, but you've defined success purely as that result, and you haven't accounted for for lack of a better term, the system to help you get that success in a more sustainable way. What I'm asking and what I'm offering with Love as a KPI is all of those things. You're not changing your focus. You're expanding how you define success. You're not changing. I am not a, this is not a leave your metrics. Let's focus on, I think this is one of the things I'm fighting internally because I myself am accountable for very specific hard metrics, right? But I also understand that to get those results sustainably, for me to have a team, like I'm taking a few days off work this week, and for me to go and rest and relax on this time off, because I know that there is a team who understands one that we have some very important metrics to hit, but also understands and hopefully understands that I've left in them the care and the capability and the confidence that they can keep going even when I'm not there. So I think it's the ask to leaders is not choosing, right? The binary, I struggle with like, even on social media, binary conversations. It's either this or that. It's not. It's how do you define success? If success is profit, it should be 100%. I'm one of those, yes, more. And if you also include in your success definition the healthiness of the team, customers who want to keep coming back, you say, what's because behind all your results are people, even the customers, your community members that don't hate you, people who are voting for you, no matter what you're doing, how do you define success that gets you your profit and also leaves people better so that even if you're selfish and you say the only reason you're going to leave them better is so they can keep going, fine, right? Fine. Sometimes you start through, you make it, sometimes it's mechanic, but then maybe you yourself changes. But I think if leaders understand that every result relies on people in some way, shape, or form, even in an AI, in fact, even more so in an AI world, they will define success in a broader way and say, how do I systematize that word? Anyways, how do I make it systemic, a profitable, strong business, and also strong people who feel like they're better off for being part of this mission with me?
Yeah, no, I hear that. So then to that end, as I read the book, I love one of the things that you did, Tibe, is that you included lots of examples for each of the principles. You had lots of companies, specific examples, whether it was, like you said, Warby Parker or some of the tech companies or a whole host of different companies across multiple industries. And you had examples of behaviors and outcomes that they had achieved by embodying these principles. And it then made me wonder, TB, is there any company that can't say that can't point to some good? Like in a sense, is this already inherent in what we're doing? Because if I look at any of those companies that you mentioned, for instance,
Yeah.
if you talk to one team member who works there, they might say, yes, this company's awesome. We did this great thing for every shoe that was sold. We gave 10 more to other people for free, like all this other stuff. And then you talk to somebody else or a different group of people and they have a completely different view.
Yeah.
They are experiencing that company completely differently. So in a sense, is it possible to please anyone or everyone? And should you even try? And what's really true? If everything can be massaged into a beautiful case study at the end of the day retroactively, what is true?
I love that question. I actually had to go find a quote on it. That's such a great question. I think that my hope is with this work is that folks identify where it's already happening and then become a lot more intentional. And I know the word of the day is always intention, but it truly is what I hope. Because to your point, yes, there are probably organizations where they just see people as numbers, but for the most part, that's not true. There's a thing my friend shared with me a few years ago that I didn't think would apply to this work, but I found that it does. She said, what we do by intention, or when we do by intention, what we have done by intuition, we achieve acceleration.
Hmm.
And so a lot of it has been through intuition. I did a presentation last year where in the a utility CX conference. And to prepare for that, I actually went out of the utility world to go to MetLife. So I used to work for MetLife. And I remember MetLife has a historian. MetLife's a very old company, 100 and maybe even 75-year-old, a really old company. And so there used to be a historian in the company. And he would do these presentations about MetLife's history. And MetLife started with, I think, either a single or two people who just wanted to help people during that had come out of the war. That was it. And so what they weren't thinking there would be this huge global multi, they were just like, these people are affected by the war. We need to provide protection for them. Oftentimes it starts with that. Many founders have a truly, even if it's to make profit, altruistic need. They cannot see people suffer. They cannot see people. That's what drives a lot of founders. It's when you scale that it then becomes harder to systematize, but you still hire good people. This is really more for many organizations and leaders. It's just a call for to be a lot more intentional about it. It's not to say you are, my hope is that no one reads it and feels condemned or, no, you are already doing this. I'm part of a company. I can say proudly that in fact, I feel safe enough to talk about my work in a company because it's already happening. And so it's more of a boost, to some a mirror, but the idea is what you've done by intuition, can you make a little bit more intentional, not for the sake of it alone, but because it actually does benefit all the business goals and things that you have as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's exactly right, right? One of the things that I know to be true, I know you know this too, just as business people, after many years as a leader, is that there's no perfection, there are no perfect stories. So even
Right.
when you have the headline, right? And I keep picking on the shoes here, but like the headline of for every shoe, right? At the end of the day, if you look close enough, if you look
Yeah.
underneath enough, you will find lots of loose ends. You'll find lots of missed opportunities. You'll find some hurt feelings from people. You'll find all kinds of things.
Ah,
But I think what you're getting at, what I'm getting anyway from this, and what I came away with when I read the book was, it's not that we're looking to get it perfectly right. Is that because if you think about it, right, solving problems and really business, because businesses solve problems, it's with more time that has passed, each problem becomes the worst game of whack-a-mole. It's like you solve this one and six other ones pop up somewhere else. And so I think what you're getting at is that you're pointing us in this North Star of if there's six things that pop up and we can solve three of them well, and we know that the other three, like we're always striving, we're always moving in the direction of, we're always highlighting those success stories where we can hold in balance all those, the KPIs from a business standpoint, the love for people, all of it in harmony. We may
yeah.
not get it right all the time, but if we can approximate, if we can move in its direction every single time, we get better and better and better and better. And so we figure out, oh wow, we can, we boosted our profits and we actually improved people some in doing that. And then the next time we did it a little bit more. And so now we never get to this perfection, but we get to a place where we have a clear North Star and we know what good looks like and what it feels like. And we're always moving in its direction decisively.
I'm so glad that that's recorded. I myself will take that clip
I
and
don't know if
share.
I could even repeat that.
Yeah, that you said it perfectly, Stella. And it's not, and I think if I was to add to the book, if, I have the opportunity one day, is I would make that point you just made. It's not this utopian world where it's perfect. And there's a reason, even in me proposing a metric, like this isn't, I didn't, I could tell you a story offline about like how I have a really good friend who's a data scientist who's like, let's create this very technical metric. And I was like, I don't think you can calculate love. That's why the score is based on confidence. It's like, how confident are you? And it's just so that we have that North Star. And we also know that going in that direction is not for naught. Going in that direction gets you, right? There's a reason the companies that are most loved, but you're right. Even within those companies, when you look closer, you're like, this, they also do this. And they also,
I,
where
I
does
mean,
the
I
waste
hear
go?
this even
Yeah.
with in the work we do with
Yeah.
clients, we can have two people work for the same company. One person is in love with the company and they're like, oh, the company did this one thing that and I want to be here for 20 more years. And the other person can't wait to get out. And it's
Yeah.
the same company. Sometimes they work in the same groups. And so there's so much of it there's some subjectivity, I suppose, to when you factor in people's experiences.
That's right. And it becomes a law of just of averages to some extent, but just having a higher average. And so that the intuition to intention piece, is it, so that more people, like I work for a company that has, I think a really strong culture, right? But I can tell you that it's not true everywhere in every department. So but it's just more often, more commonly. And if, for example, there's one leader, who is the one out of the 50 different leaders who is just known for, being the one that people feel beat down, maybe they'll be at least aware that, so that's a big idea.
So
That's the big idea.
I want to, for our audience who's listening, and our audience are usually leaders who are, at the, maybe I would say the middle of their careers, senior managers, directors, maybe some VPs, SVPs. And so I want to see if we can give them a couple of concrete examples, like real life examples, right? We can talk about these companies and this abstract form, but let's just talk about real people who find themselves in these real interpersonal or business challenges at work. And let's see if we can figure out a way to, again, not in the going back to what I said about not perfect, right? We may not have the perfect answer, but what are some considerations? How can we help people make better decisions in line with love as a KPI versus what they would do otherwise, right? So let's say, for instance, you have a person who is responsible and maybe even accountable for delivering higher sales in the business. Like
Mhm.
that's their entire their entire existence in this company is that they were supposed to deliver a 25% bump this quarter in sales. Okay. And in order for them to do that, to be able to do that, they have the option of designing something that may not be the absolute best design they could put out there for their customers, but it will be good enough and it'll get out there and they will sell, right? And maybe that's what they're really trying to do. What should that person be thinking about? How should they be making that call? Should they then say, you know what, I need to save my butt, right, this quarter so I keep my job, because if I'm not in the job, I don't, this is all for naught. Or should they be thinking about this differently? I think it's helpful to give people some real examples so that they can figure out how to, again, we may not be able to tell them what to do, but
Yeah,
how should they be thinking about the problems that they're solving for?
that's awesome. And I think because a lot of this is about just navigating the tensions
Yeah.
between one or the other. And so in this case, when you say not the best design, is a product harmful? Like, is that
Nope,
what?
it's no. I mean, and that's the thing. There's some. We all know that when something's harmful, don't do it. Like I think that goes without saying. Like it's not
Yeah,
harmful, it's not toxic, it's not poisonous. It's just that we could implement some improvements that would make this easier and for
yeah,
people to use and more economically friendly and all the things. But again, it will take time. It will delay our
yeah.
sales.
Okay, so here's like practically what I would consider. Are you selling well as it is? Are you finding that your clients feel like this is a good product for me? I understand how it's used, it's beneficial, all of those things, and without any friction, without any pushback, you're selling. Again, it's not harmful, obviously. So like you're selling. I think that's fine. I think here are the things to consider. If the product, someone else makes a product that reflects a deeper understanding of your, and this, and I love that you said this stuff is already happening, but if someone makes a product that reflects a deeper understanding of your client's needs, and it reflects them, it takes also a lot of effort away from the client, so they don't have to spend so much effort. Those are levers of value, by the way. And love is part of it. Like the loving thing is, I don't want taking effort, increasing value. Those are part of the framework. And so if someone else has done that, you have to also understand that then you have competition because people feel more seen. I talked earlier about listening to your boot camp, and for whatever reason, and you may not have said, and this is the thing, right? You may not have said, let me love these people through this boot camp, but you were so specific in talking to me that I felt seen. I felt appreciated. And in fact, Stella, I felt safe to work with you. And so it's the understanding of the dynamics that what makes people stay with people, what makes people buy, what makes people stay, the elements of love are woven into that without us. So in your case of the salesperson, if you find that you're making traction, keep going, but know that you can add more value to the people that it's for. And what does value mean in this case? I'm making assumptions. It's you're making them feel like this is made for me. You understand their problem so well that it's spot on. All of those things are levers, literally levers of value that if you cared enough about someone, you would increase. So you can keep going and then you can sort of go with it, but understand that the risk is if someone else comes and says, I have made this for people who are 5'6", and you have actually given me this feedback, but on different things. I've made this for people who are 5'6" and have shoulder length hair. And this, in fact, before you even have to do steps 1 and 2, I've done them for you. They're probably, unless there's something about you that's so unique and some other level of value that you're providing them, ah, just understand that that's the risk. And so
Yeah.
love as a KPI helps you think about how do I add more value to people,
Yeah.
which also allows you to charge more as a salesperson.
Yes. Okay. So I see. So what you're saying there is obviously safeguard the business because of the business, safeguard the business and obviously safeguard your role, right? Because if you're not there and the business isn't there, then this is all there's no business. And so we're all, up a creek here. But what I'm hearing you say is beyond that, beyond the
Yes.
safeguarding of the business, you should always be reaching for what is going to be best for the customer because that makes business sense. It's not even simply just a loving thing to do. You may not have much of a business if a competitor figures out how to deliver a better product that is more user friendly to the customer. And it so happens to be the loving thing to do anyway, but it also is business. It makes business sense.
That is perfectly said.
Okay. All right.
Ah, I'm going to take that clip, and I know we have time, but the reason I'm reacting so strongly is that's exactly the point. The thing that will add more value is the thing, if you care enough to learn, right? Again, offline, I'll tell you about my own struggles with this. Like, but if you care enough to learn enough about this segment, you're doing the extra work. And even if your motivation is but what you're demonstrating when you is like you cared enough to learn, take all my time and money. That's the reaction people have. And so even if it's not motivated by love, people apply these principles and it's better when it is motivated by love because
Yeah.
then you
Well, it goes back to your intuition intention thing. It may not be consciously motivated by love, but somewhere deep within, intuitively, we know that that is the right thing. And so
100%
that's what we do.
value. That's right.
Let's throw one more example. And I know in the interest of time, I want to be mindful of your time, but let's see if we can do another example that is maybe related to interpersonal. So you're a leader at work and you are let's see if I can come up with one on the spot. You're a leader at work and you are in a room where the senior leader is um, maybe not being speaking as kindly to another leader in the room, right? And so this has nothing to do with you. You're kind of off to the, and I know you have your own experience with this actually, now that I pick this example. But you're in the room, there's a conversation that's happening. This leader is berating or is saying something that is not, maybe not berating, because we all know, again, we know, I want to get at what's beyond what we know obviously is wrong.
Obvious. Yeah.
So this person is not berating, but they are not speaking in a way that is the kindest or the most polite, right? They're being a little bit on the nose. And you can see the impact it's having on this other leader. And so now you're tempted to say, well, do I want to be in the crosshairs of this executive who with can affect my career, or do I want to say something about this decision? So in that scenario, what would you say to somebody who's found themselves there? I bet you there are people listening who's like, I dealt with that 3 times yesterday, right? So what would you say to someone in that boat?
I think it depends truly on your own leverage in the organization and what you can do. I think the bare minimum, that you can do is after, right? After it's done and said, just either a kind word to the person who's affected, right? And not being shy, especially if you're like, this isn't the, whether or not it was deserved, a kind word to the person that's affected makes them not feel alone in the situation. That makes them not feel shame or not ostracized. Like that's free. Like that one you can do. And you don't have to make it dramatic. Jennifer, sorry, you could do it after the fact. Depending on your leverage, and this is why I love these examples still. Just love talking to you because don't take stupid risks, right? If you don't have the kind of relationship or dynamic or equity where you can speak to that leader either there or after, or you can signal, right? Because sometimes you have enough clout where you can, even if that leader's going, you can then change the energy. If you can do that, you can do it. But if you don't take the risk. At the very least, you'll be the one who that person remembers, sought them out just to give a word of encouragement. And if you have beyond encouragement, some tips on how to navigate that leader, share that, right? That one will come back to you somewhere, somehow. It's going to show up.
That's a complicated one, right? And
Yeah.
I've actually, I can share a story. I think our clients have maybe heard the story at some point, but I found myself in a similar position, not quite the same, but this is when I made director. I was in a hiring panel,
Mm.
we were hiring two people who were going to be in a very important role. They were going to be working in the office of the highest office in the company. I'll put it that way. And so these were really critical hires, and I was part of the hiring team. And we put these people through the ringer. I mean, all of the different, I mean, I don't even know, like 16 interviews, presentations out the wazoo, so much just to land this job. And there was one, at the end of it, there were three finalists, and we were deciding who the final, the three people left, deciding who the final two candidates would be. And one of those candidates was a woman, a Black woman, and had done phenomenally well in her interview process, right? Grades, these are undergrad hires, right? Grades were
Mm.
excellent, all the things. And everyone, and in fact, everyone there was awesome. Everyone who had made it to that point was fantastic. And so now, of course, after many rounds, everyone in the hiring panel had their own favorites. Everybody had who they wanted. There's all this lot, all this stuff was going on. And at the 11th hour, now mind you, I was probably the least ranked person in this room. I'd also just meet director. It was pretty fresh,
Mm.
so I should have said nothing. But at the 11th hour, someone said about the woman the Black woman, yeah, she has a 4.0 GPA, but look at the school that she went to. It's not all
Mm.
the others went to Ivy League schools. She went to, it was an HBCU, went to an H, and I am an HBCU grad. My MBA was from Howard. And so I'm like, oh, I like my ears just perked up, like, wait, what? And so I don't even know where the courage came from. And I don't even know if I would, if I thought about it too much, I may have talked myself out of it. But I remember saying, if her school was a criteria, we should have made that clear from the beginning. We should not then at the end of the process use that criteria of what school she went to and then discount her grades because she didn't go to Harvard or Wharton or wherever the others went. You could have heard a pin drop. And I remember even after the words left my mouth, like, oh shit, what did I just say? Right. And then after I said that, another person said, yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Yeah, we should probably then they said, let's pull up our criteria, because sometimes
Mhm.
these meetings, you go up, you have your criteria that you started off with, and then 2 hours in, that's all by the wayside. And now other biases and feelings and emotions and preferences start to enter into the mix. And so when I said that, whoever was in charge of that PowerPoint that had the criteria was like, yeah, let's go back to that. They pulled that up, and then we went back to that. Needless to say, this woman ended up, she was hired. She ended up working in the organization, eventually did a rotation in my team. And so I share this because again, these are real. I don't want to talk about these as platitudes or as like, this aspirational thing. We can all be doing that in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
I remember even after that, my boss called me to the side, like, "Whoa, like that was a big one." And I was like, at the time, I just could not say something.
Yeah.
Why else would I be sitting there?
Come
Why
on.
else was I there?
Come on.
So I think that's why I wanted to tie this all together that yes, we're talking about love as a KPI in terms of businesses, but ultimately it's people. Like we're individuals at crossroads multiple times in our day at work, and we get a chance to decide who will be. And that's all it really comes down to is like, who will you be at that crossroad when the stakes are high, when either option could be justified. I could justify saying nothing. I could nobody else said anything. You could justify either, and we're smart enough to be able to justify whatever decisions we make and make it the right one after it's done. But deep within what the right thing is. And I think it's just what you're calling us with your body of work here is to have the courage to lean all the way in and to do it and to always be to again orient ourselves in that direction every single day. And that I think is what makes all the difference.
I'm so glad you recorded this podcast because I need to listen to it. Thank you for thank you for, thank you for recording it because you put so eloquently and so perfectly what the stirrings of my own heart have been on this topic, Stella. I think do the best, the most good you can do per time. And I think your example is just like a shining and I love your example so much because you did it's in a non-emotional, like in a non, like you didn't bring attention to yourself. You brought attention back to order, to process. And so it's hard to argue with that. You brought attention to not, you didn't say you're treating her unfairly or you're doing it because she's black. You didn't do any of that. You said and that in itself requires even dissecting, how you thought through what to say in that process. Honestly, I'm not just saying that because there's something bulletproof about the way you approach that if we could codify it, would be helpful for to people
Well,
in those
I'm actually
positions?
glad you said that because it gives me a chance to highlight something I often tell our clients. I assume good intent in people.
Hmm.
So when I said what I said, I wasn't saying it to shame the leader who had made the comment. I actually liked that leader. I did not believe that leader had any biases that they were trying to lead from. I didn't think they had nefarious intent. And oftentimes, even in the work we do with our clients, sometimes they'll say to me like, oh, that leader is doing that because of this reason or that other nefarious reason. And I'm often the one that says, let's start with good intent. Let's begin with good intent, right? I'm not naive in thinking that people don't have ill intent sometimes, but I always want to start with that baseline, right? Because so much of what you experience has to do with what you already think. And so the ability to clean up that, clean up the way we're approaching it and say, okay, what is the intent, right? Let's begin with that first before we assign beliefs to other people, right? I find I've gotten farther approaching things that way. So yeah, to your point, it wasn't about grandstanding. It wasn't about shaming anybody or making a name for myself in any way. It was quite the opposite. It was like, okay, what's the process, right? Let's go back to the process. So sometimes just that alone can be a catalyst in the right direction.
And I might argue to myself that you have an inherent love for people that allows you to start there. Because I wrote down your goal was not to shame or to call or to put yourself above, and so it's already in us. I mean, I know it's already in you because of what I know of you, and I think this is just a call for us to pull on that version of ourselves more. So
Okay, one final note I want us to cover before we wrap here is the idea for people who are sitting there and they're like, wow, I'm so encouraged by the fact that she was able to create this body of work, right? And maybe they feel like they have something in them,
mm,
a message, a calling, a conviction. You and I are examples of leaders who stepped out, quote unquote, on faith and created something, right? Using our careers as a jump off point. What do you have to say to someone like that? Somebody who may has a career but has something else that they're doing and wants to figure out how to do both. I want to hear your perspective in the hopes that it's helpful for someone who's navigating those waters currently.
I'll do both the inspirational thing and then the practical thing. I think the inspirational thing is if you've listened to this and you know Stella's story, you've listened to this podcast, and the thing that keeps coming up, in fact, it feels like a burden. The thing you need to do, write, say, speak, launch out is just on your mind so much that you can't even listen, you can't even focus on what you're hearing. You just feel so burdened by it. It means you need to do it. I often tell people that what you want wants you more than you want it. It means you just need to do it. Practically, what does it look like? It looks like even starting with what's the 1 hour one, I guess actually to be honest, one is just like defining a good goal or target and saying, defining a timeline, like Stella would tell me, and saying, what's the one thing I can do today? Even doing that will fuel you. What you don't want the feeling that you don't want, which I've had, is like you've been giving this thing to birth and to nurture, and you are neglecting it. And you don't want to. What you'll start to see is people doing the same thing that you're supposed to do, and it'll trigger you. But it's imperative that you do it. It doesn't matter how many people sound like they're doing the same thing. It is imperative that you do it. And you know yourself. If you're listening, you know yourself. It's not a fly by night thing. It's been on your mind. It's the thing people go to you for. It's the thing that you would do for free. You would talk about it for free if you could. It's imperative that you do it. And I think it's just ownership of your time, and dedicating time. A lot of the book has been, as Stella said, nights, weekends, just it's been so stretchy, but it's been absolutely worth it because I know this is aligned with what I'm here to do. So
Yeah, I love that. I know for me, when you said that, the thing you would do for free, I coached a lot for free. I'll tell you that before, before anything. So I love that you said that, the thing that you'll do for free. Such a clarifying thought as you start to decide. But I think even in the conversation we've had today, hopefully we've given leaders, whether they start a business or not, or write a book or not, that even where they are, they can bloom where they're planted. They can be a shining example within their organizations on how to demonstrate love and embody love, with those that they encounter every single day. Anything else, TB? Anything else we haven't covered that you really want to say that you want to be a part of this message to our audience?
I'm smiling. I know this is audio, but I'm smiling because you've actually you've covered that even in your rap. It's the act of embodying love, right? We do it through intuition, just being a lot more intentional, and it's not at odds with what you're solving for. In fact, it's an accelerant to it. So.
Let me show the book again here on video. It's Love as a KPI by Utibe Bassey. The Surprising Strategic Advantage of Great Companies. An awesome read. I read this. I took it with me everywhere for a couple of weeks. And, I have little ones, so I don't have quite the luxury of just, binging books like I used to, but I made sure I was dedicated and I wanted to read it before we had this conversation. So thank you again, TB, for putting this out into the world. Where can people find you, find the book? How can they take the conversation to the next step if they want to connect with you in some way?
For sure. I'm on LinkedIn. Utibe Bassey, Love as a KPI is the header. I also have a website that I set up just to have folks interact with some of the materials there. It's loveasakpi.com. And the book is on Amazon. If you read it and you have thoughts or challenges, I'm always here for either of that. So please feel free to reach out.
Excellent. So we'll put all those details in the show notes for you. So if you're listening, click the show notes, check out all those details on how to get the book and how to stay in touch with the TBA. TBA, thank you so much for having this conversation with me today. Really appreciate it, and can't wait to see just all the good that this book does as it gets into the hands of more and more leaders. Thanks again.
I'm so grateful. Thank you, Stella.